so much for joining us. Early for some of us here on the West Coast and lunchtime for those of us joining from the East Coast, but we're very excited to launch this together with you all today. Before we get started, I'll just introduce everyone who's going to be speaking on the call today. My name is Shakti Ramkumar. I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Communications at Student Energy, and I'll just be helping facilitate a little bit today. And I'll pass it to Gemma next.
Hi folks, my name is Gemma Patey. For this project, I was the Research and Youth Engagement Coordinator, working on some of the data, some of the literature review, and the interview process. So really excited to be speaking with you all and sharing some of our findings today. And I'll pass it over to Sarah.
Hey everybody, my name is Sarah Fontaine and I was an interview specialist for this project. And we conducted many interviews, Jenna and I, together, and it was a lot of fun. So I can't wait to share our findings.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Kimia Rezagian. Je suis la directrice du programme de plaidoyer et mobilisation à l'Association canadienne des médecins pour l'environnement. Je n'ai pas travaillé sur cet rapport, alors moi aussi j'ai vraiment hâte d'apprendre à propos du rapport des panélistes, mais je suis ici pour le soutien en français. Alors si vous avez des questions en français pendant la séance, vous êtes bienvenus de les poser dans la boîte de questions et réponses en dessous. Et je vais les traduire pour les panélistes. Alors, bienvenue, je suis vraiment contente d'être ici et j'ai hâte pour le panel aussi.
Great, thank you everybody. And before we begin, I want to share a land acknowledgement, recognizing that we're all, of course, joining from different parts of what is currently called Canada today. It's still very important for us to acknowledge the original stewards of these lands. I myself am calling in from the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo traditional and unceded territories, also known as Surrey, British Columbia. And in particular context for this project, we reflected a lot on where the young people that we interviewed call home and how that influences the experiences that they have in the clean energy sector and how the companies that they interact with, the government institutions that they interact with, shape their career journeys, shape their lived experiences when it comes to energy. So it was a running theme for us throughout the course of doing this research project to consider not only our own positionality as researchers and where we're coming from, but also how the lands and spaces that our youth interviewees are coming from influence their perspectives and their lived experiences. So we ask that as we go throughout the report and share these findings, that you will also take some time to reflect on where you're coming from and your own positionality and how that influences your own journeys and those you may interact with. A quick agenda for how we'll spend our hour together today. Now that we've done our introductions, we'll share a short background of the project and how it came to be, the context in which we began doing our research. We'll then share some of the main findings from the project, focusing on what we heard from the youth that we interviewed, the industry actors, and from the Indigenous knowledge keepers that we spoke to towards the close of the project. We'll then share some reflections on the methodology and just how the project went. We'll have Gemma and Sarah, who did so many interviews together, share some reflections on what the process was like and some recommendations for anyone else doing qualitative research out there. We'll share a few next steps on where we're going with this project next and how you can get involved. And we'll make sure to have some time for questions before we close out. So thank you so much. And you can drop your questions in the chat as you think of them at any time, and we'll come to them during the Q&A portion. So before we dive into this particular project, I'll do a very, very speedy overview of Student Energy. I can see many of the names on the call, and you're likely familiar with Student Energy already, but those of you who are new to us, we are a youth-led organization, the largest one that's working on energy, and we work with a network of 50,000 young people in over 120 countries. And our main goal is to empower young people to take action on energy in their communities, and we offer a variety of different programs for them to do so, 9 unique programs through our programs ecosystem that are all designed to meet young people where they're at and support them in their journey to get involved in clean energy. This particular portfolio is one of our newest at Student Energy. It's called the Research and Youth Engagement Portfolio. And our goal in this program is to steward original youth-led research projects because we've so often noted that there's such a shortage of research in this particular age range of young people aged 18 to 30. Even though we're now forming the largest voting bloc in many countries, even though these young people will form the future of the energy workforce, that they will have to implement the policies that are being announced now. So despite their significance in carrying out the energy transition, we find that there is a definite lack of research around this age range. So we'd like to support more youth-led projects, our own and led by others as well. We also lead youth advisory councils in partnership with governments, with companies, and other decision-making institutions who may be new to working with young people, and kind of partner with them so that they can do it in an equitable way. And we also support delegations of youth to conferences and other decision-making spaces where they're integrated as speakers so that they can be heard where decisions about clean energy are being made. So there's a sample of a few of our recent projects. 4 of them are reports that we've published that you can check out on our website. It all began with the Global Youth Energy Outlook, and since then we've published a few more. This one will be our 5th. Our 4th. And the other one, the one on the bottom left there, is a really cool project we did last year called the Youth Energy Narratives Council. That's the YENC you see there. And it was a council of 5 young people from around the world who were focused on art and storytelling as a primary medium to take action on clean energy. So we're open to doing a lot of creative projects. So if you ever have ideas, this is you can reach out to us. And now on to the report. I just wanted to share that the report will be out on our website. Here's where you can check it out. There's a lot of people who made this report possible. And first and foremost, we want to thank the young people that we interviewed, the industry actors that we interviewed, and the Indigenous knowledge keepers who so graciously shared their time for this project. Their contributions, stories, and quotes are really at the heart of this report, as much of qualitative research is. Their contributions are what really made this report possible, so we want to thank them. Also, a big thank you to our research and design team. Gemma and Sarah, who you'll be hearing from today, led the research and interview process and the writing process for this report, and it's been a huge labor of love over the past year. A huge shout out to Ailette, who is our graphic designer, who's responsible for everything you see on the screen today, as well as in the report itself. She's been wonderful to work with on this report, and she is also a data and information designer. So any beautiful graphs you see, it's Ailette's work translating the data we gathered in this research into a beautiful visual format. And finally, we'd like to thank the Canadian Climate Action and Awareness Fund, or CAF as we've been calling it, who is our major lead sponsor for this project. And it's been great to support Canada's net zero advisory body mandate in this way, where this funding allowed a team of young people to engage with other young people. And that for us is a really meaningful way to do this work. So thank you to everyone who made this report possible. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Gemma to share a little bit about the background of this project.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shakti. So for this project, where we started off was acknowledging that there is a huge rapid growth in the clean energy sector. And we're seeing a lot of jobs being reallocated from jobs that were in other sectors of the energy industry towards clean energy. And so with this, from the work that Student Energy has done, as well as daily engagement with youth, we're seeing that youth are interested, they are educated, they are skilled, and they are well poised to take on much of the demand of clean energy jobs. We also know from some of the research that we've done that skill building and training is essential for getting jobs and for reskilling into new career paths. But what we've been hearing from youth is that they are running into so many barriers when seeking clean energy jobs. And while some youth have been successful, as many of our interviewees could note, we also encountered many stories of youth struggling to get into the clean energy sector. Youth are really in a unique position to gain some of the skills either through education, skills training programs, reskilling programs, and to get these skills that are needed for the clean energy industry and where it is growing into. But we noticed a significant gap in the research in regards to what the skills are that are most needed by the clean energy industry and how youth can build their skills to fill in these gaps in what is needed in the coming years. So we'll head over to our next slide. And this led us to some of our key research questions that informed this research. So our first research question, deriving right from that gap that we noticed, is what is the gaps between the skills that young people have and the skills that clean energy employers in Canada are looking for? For this project, we are focusing just on Canada as a microcosm of the global clean energy industry, but it provided us the ability to look in depth and to hear the stories about what youth are facing specifically within Canada. So while some of the findings that we have are limited in scope to Canada as a whole, there's also so much potential to be transferring and testing these findings in other areas of the world. Our second research question was, what are young people's perspectives on the clean energy economy and on the availability of opportunities and pathways to access careers related to clean energy? So what we're hoping to gain from this question is to see if youth are feeling good or not about the future of the clean energy industry and their role in it. Our last question, we wanted to dive into what supports youth in Canada need and from whom in order to access jobs in the clean energy industry. So really kind of diving into those action-oriented, what do youth need and how are we going to do it? We'll head over to our next slide. And just dive quickly into the methodology, because the methodology we used for this report is slightly different from some of the other methodologies used in previous student energy reports. So some of the words that could describe this research and our approach that we took was qualitative, inductive, and nuanced. So the ways in which we went about this research was to interview 50 youth and 6 industry actors from all across what's currently known as Canada and from various backgrounds in clean energy. Mostly youth, they nominated themselves and they were selected to represent a diversity of backgrounds. And some youth were invited through direct outreach in order to make sure that we were hitting some of our key demographics in Canada that weren't represented from those initial self-nominations from youth. Within the report, as you'll read, we have quotes and stories that are specifically tied to youth and their experiences, but they've been anonymized for this report. So while we'll see some quotes that are direct about some youth's experiences, we made sure to not attach a name or identity to that individual. We also interviewed 2 Indigenous knowledge keepers who shared the big picture perspective and made sure that the future of the energy transition and this research project were really in line. After doing all of these interviews, we transcribed, coded, and synthesized some of the trends in the data based on our research questions. And overall, the goal of our research was really to stay true to the words and to the stories of youth. So while we were able to take out and abstract some of the patterns and similarities that we were seeing amongst youth, as well as some of those differences across what youth are experiencing, we're able to keep some stories in here. And I think that really adds to the value of this report and keeps it grounded in the experiences of youth. So now we'll get into the exciting bits and we will talk about some of our main findings. So our first set of findings revolved around skill sets. So we asked both the 50 youth that we interviewed as well as the 10 industry actors that we interviewed, what are the most important skill sets that youth need in order to get a job in clean energy? So we divided up these skill sets into 5 categories: technical, communication, climate, soft, and business skills. And from this, we found out that youth find that communication skills and technical skills are the top skill sets that they need to get a job in clean energy. And this differs slightly when we asked industry actors. Industry actors said that they seek soft skills and communication skills as the top skill sets in potential youth employees. And so we see some overlap when it comes to those communication skills, but it seems that youth are valuing a different set of skill sets and seeing that those skill sets are more needed than industry actors are saying that they need. So we're seeing a little bit of difference in regards to those skill sets. Some youth also described it as a 5-circle Venn diagram, as you will see on the screen there. So while youth may have certain skills in different skill sets, there's so much overlap when it comes to what they have and what industry is needing. Youth noted that these skill sets can also vary quite a lot depending on the job that they're looking to get into. So while we can take this as kind of an overarching findings, it's not necessarily the same for every single job youth may be applying to. One of the top tips that youth gave were to lean into your strengths and don't be afraid to try building a new skill. So we'll head into our next section on skills and specific skills that both youth and industry actors were identifying. So when youth were asked what their top skills were, they were commonly identified as soft skills. So this involved things such as adaptability, project management, relationship building, curiosity, drive and passion, and self-awareness. Some of the other top skills included energy technologies, data analysis, public speaking, and networking. I really liked that emphasis of networking as a top skill to get a job in clean energy, because youth framed it as a skill that was needed to be honed in order to get jobs in the current clean energy industry. From the industry perspective, the top skills that they were looking for also commonly fell within the soft skills category. So oftentimes this was a demonstrated passion for clean energy and the environment, being reliable, being self-aware and independent, being teachable, and also having some of those strong relationship building skills. And so we can see a lot of overlap here as well. But from the industry side, what we heard commonly brought up was that industry actors are looking for people who are a good fit for their company or organization, and who are very teachable. So you don't need to come into an organization with all the technical skills, especially coming into an entry-level role, but instead you need to be a good fit for the organization and be able to work towards building those technical skills. So that was a really key finding that we found from employers. We'll head into our next section. And one of the things that we were hearing a lot from youth was about barriers. So as I mentioned beforehand, we're recognizing that youth have so much passion for the clean energy industry, but not every youth who wants a job in clean energy is able to get those. So over half of youth that we interviewed felt that it is very difficult to enter into the clean energy industry, and a quarter felt it was moderately difficult. So that is 3/4 of youth who are finding it quite difficult in order to get a job in clean energy. And some of the rationale they provided was that employers are looking for a lot more experience than youth have. So employers are oftentimes looking for 5 to 10 years of experience, even for jobs that may be considered entry level. And so what this is, the problem this is creating for youth is that they don't have the ability to build some of these skills or experiences that may be needed for the clean energy roles they want to get into, because they're not able to get the roles based on the level of experience required. Another thing that kind of coincides with this was the lack of entry-level jobs. Many jobs, again, are looking for those increased amounts of experience, and not necessarily at that foundational skill building level of jobs that youth need. Additionally, some of the barriers were the cost of education and training, and the benefits and pay being too low in the industry. The location of jobs was brought up as being a barrier for some youth who are perhaps more remote or rural. And then not knowing where to look for jobs in clean energy was also brought up as a major barrier. And so youth are always action-oriented when it comes to thinking about barriers and then thinking about solutions. And so we wanted to ask youth about what supports they need, what they're seeing, and what could help their drive to find jobs in clean energy easier. So if we go to the next slide, you will see that we asked both youth and industry actors, what supports do youth need? What are you seeing? And so there was a lot of coordination. There's a lot of overlap between these two sets of interviews that we did. So both sets of interviews said that we need more coordination between various actors in the industry. So that means we need educational institutions talking to government, who's talking to industry, who's then talking to youth and trying to figure out what do youth want as well. So we need a lot more coordination here. Additionally, timely information on the labor needs in the clean energy sector was noted, as well as the value of mentorship opportunities. And funded training opportunities was also highlighted. From the youth side specifically, we're hearing, as I mentioned before, about more entry-level jobs being needed, central spaces for finding jobs. We need to see employers building relationships with youth and having more outreach to youth, engagement there, as well as more co-ops and internship opportunities for students. And then on the industry employer side, we see that there's a need for more government-funded training and education, more consistent funding for clean energy programs, projects, and companies, as well as government support for youth wage subsidies. So we're seeing many different needs, many different supports coming in here. And if we head to the next slide, we'll also see that youth had specific asks for both industry actors, educational institutions, and governments from various levels. And so while the report goes a little bit more into depth into each of these, as a quick teaser, from industry employers, we need to see more jobs available for youth. There also needs to see, we need to see some more relationships being built with youth. So connecting with them as much as possible through engagements at schools and in organizations such as Student Energy. And then another major thing they brought up was about building good work-life balance and having good paying jobs. For educational institutions, we heard from youth that they desire an alignment of teaching with what the industry currently needs, as there sometimes happens to be some disconnect within universities and colleges and what students are being taught. Youth want to see more hands-on work opportunities. And one key thing that was brought up was around divesting from fossil fuels. So youth noted the sad irony coming out of a degree in hopes of working in clean energy, but their tuition money was being invested in the fossil fuel industry. So youth are kind of noting some of these structural issues as well that they're seeing within educational institutions. And then for governments, what youth and industry is hoping to see is more funding for tuition, for wage subsidies, for employers to hire more youth, for skills building. There needs to be a prioritization of clean energy funding that is coming from government in support of youth. So this is some of the major findings that we had. But if we go to the next slide, just to finish up my section here, we also wanted to know how youth are feeling about the future of the clean energy industry. So overall, about 3/4 of youth believe that the clean energy offers promising career paths. So even though they're facing so many barriers in order to get into the industry, they still feel good about it. They're still wanting to pursue it, and they are still engaged with clean energy. But what was important to note is that this percentage does drop to 50% of youth who are low income and 62% of youth who are Indigenous and racialized youth. And so what these statistics show is that there's a lot more work that needs to be done to ensure that youth experience equitable access to the clean energy industry, opportunities, and careers. So that is the responsibility of both governments, of educational institutions, of industry employers. This requires a holistic look at what change needs to come. And so with that, I will pass the microphone over to Sarah to chat about some of their findings from this research as well.
Thanks, Gemma. Yeah, so as everyone has said, I was involved in the interview process, and I find it's always very exciting. During the interview process, when there's consistent overlap, you notice trends in communal passion, which is often empowering, and it makes you feel less alone in the battle for betterment. What I seen during the interviews was passion and compassion, and I seen eco-anxiety also, but you also hear many great solutions and recommendations, and so that really helps, and it becomes exciting. A common theme is coming together as industry, government, and institution, as Emma had said, on advancements in educational access, so we can have youth and entry level professionals integrate into these positions with ease. What I found really unique, and what will always remain unique about Indigenous youth and Indigenous perspectives, is that Indigenous values and ways of life revolve around land stewardship. It's so ingrained in our identity that there's no other way of living for most of us. But besides that passion for sustainability, besides that was the passion for sustainability was a call for equity inclusion for First Nations communities. Joint equity is very new to the industry. And it's a new concept for government also. And so where we often see very minimal community consultation and often no consent or involvement in the industry, and that really needs to change. And Indigenous youth all over the world are calling for this. And that's what's really nice about being able to be in the interview process and really hear those perspectives and that passion coming through. It's really exciting. We really wanted to bring the elder and knowledge keeper perspective, as traditionally that is our process, is just bringing information to the community and then having the elders inform it with the last say. This was important for us as we discussed new industry and new technologies and their impacts on the environment. And I think it will remain important as we progress with advancements. And then, yeah, I think I just want to say I absolutely love interviewing people. Like I've done it before, not just in this position. I've done it for my First Nation, for my community. And the intimacy with hearing a person's story and getting to embody it really makes the work personal. It helps you become compassionate to everyone's reality, which in turn helps decision making. I've had experiences in the past where industry is only interested in hearing one topic while interviewing, but life is so intersectional that we must consider everything and everyone. And this is where Indigenous perspective is important as we approach in a holistic way, considering all circles of life. The very bottom line when coming into a territory with new development is Indigenous consultation and consent. The way we can ensure this is happening is creating relationships with Indigenous communities whose traditional territory you are on. And when creating surveys, considering plants and animals along with the environmental impacts. I think one thing that's really important also is allowing space for interviewers to add questions which are informed by patterns they are hearing. I know that Gemma and I had added a question or two halfway through our process because we had recognized things that were overlapping, and we realized they were really important. And so often if a company is coming in and they're doing these things, you have to be aware that it might not always be what you anticipated, and there needs to be room for some change. Interviews should always include both youth and elders. It's our youth future, so they should always be included in this process, and their perspective should always be respected. I think also providing honorariums for their time to reduce any barriers for partaking. These interviews can run over an hour, depending on how much a person has to contribute, and often people have to take time out of their agenda for this. And so that's just another like very fun thing too. I think Gemma and I both got to really like learn how interesting a lot of people are. You know, there's side conversations, and those side conversations you will find a lot of valuable information too. And so, you know, when you're considering all of this and you leave that room for the interviewers to kind of allow that, you're going to have a much more impactful findings. It was really fun. You know, I even had fun going over the data and editing all the transcripts because, you know, it's just like reiterating a lot of that information and again, hearing that overlap and how powerful that is and, you know, how we're all kind of on the same page and looking for the same outcome. It's very empowering. I think that's all I have to say. I'll pass it back to Shakti.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I should have switched to the slide earlier as you were reflecting, but now that we've shared some of the main findings from this report, I just want to make some a few minutes for Gemma and Sarah to share any other reflections they had from the process. I think this was a new way of doing research for student energy, and in discussing with other researchers, with other young people, we learned a lot about the value of doing qualitative research. It's often more difficult. It can be more time consuming. It can cost more because we want to compensate everyone that participates in the report. And it would be much easier to just mine an existing data set somewhere. But we wanted to take this approach and pilot it so that we can do bigger projects this way. So I'll make some time for Gemma and Sarah to share anything about the qualitative research process and any advice or recommendations they may have for others who want to do similar story-based or interview-based research.
Brilliant, thank you. And I know Sarah's already touched on some of the brilliant findings that we found from youth in regards to that passion that we just saw absolutely radiating off of most of the youth that we interviewed. So I first want to just start off by saying thank you to all the youth that we interviewed, as well as thank you to all the industry actors that we interviewed and the elders that we interviewed, because this work, this body of research would not have been possible without you giving us at least an hour of your day, emailing back and forth, and all the reflections that you're able to pass along. It's through that knowledge and through those perspectives that we were able to synthesize some of these findings and hopefully inform some of the changes that need to occur within the clean energy industry. So a huge thank you goes to everyone who gave their time to this project. In regards to the values of qualitative research, I think it is such a underused space to get the nuance that is sometimes missed by quantitative research. So while we could have just stopped and said, hey, youth, which of these skill sets do you think is most important for getting a job in clean energy? We could instead hear why. All of the reasons that go behind that answer and all the skills that they've been able to build along the way, where they got those skills. There was just so much information to be gleaned from just one question. And it's through the interview process that we were able to derive some of these stories. What was so important to many of us working on this project was to stay true to some of the words that youth were saying and incorporate it word for word into the project. And so you'll see throughout the final report, we have scatterings of direct word for word quotations coming from youth, so you can hear directly from their mouths of what is important to them. Ideally, I would have wanted to make this like an 1,000-page report with like every single quote that youth had to say and share with us. But we had to do so much. We had to also make sure to synthesize some of the findings and some of the themes that came out of this. And so that is where the heart of the research came from, was looking at all of these stories that youth are passing along and trying to figure out where they all intersect, also where they diverge, depending on various questions that we ask them. So it was overall a very rewarding experience. And I think one of my biggest takeaways was just how in awe I was after every interview I did. I would just come back, Sarah and I would chat after almost every interview and it'd just be like, I thought they were unbelievable. Like everything they've accomplished so far, being so young. And so I think that's also one of the main takeaways from this project is just how inspired and driven and passionate youth in this space are, and how they are going to be the ones to lead us to that clean energy future. And so with that, maybe I'll pass it over to Sarah. I wanted to just pose the question, see if you have any other thoughts on this, and also see if you have any reflections on how this research also included Indigenous youth within this project.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. So like I was saying, and like I think a lot of people are aware that Indigenous people really value storytelling. And so this way of interviewing, again, is really important because it becomes personal. And like Gemma said at the end there, it was really exciting. We would get together and we'd be like, oh wow, did you hear what this youth had to say? And there was even some interviews that I went and watched the recordings of that Gemma did just because I was curious from the work that the organization or the person was doing, or the person who was themselves. It was very exciting, and one of my biggest like things was when me and Gemma both interviewed an elder, a knowledge keeper each, and I went to go watch Gemma's interview with the knowledge keeper, and I was watching Gemma's reaction to the things she was saying. And as an Indigenous person, I'm always really empowered and excited when a non-Indigenous person hears our stories and is impacted from them, and to visually see Gemma's reaction in her face, it was pretty empowering. And you can, like, during these interview process, you could see people thinking, and new solutions are coming up as they're doing it, like they're already preparing. We gave the questions beforehand in case people wanted to prepare, but then as we're doing the interview face to face, more things come up, and so that's also very exciting. And so, yeah, just like my key takeaway, like I said earlier, was that overlap of recommendation, that overlap of concern. It just really makes you feel less alone, and it just shows that we all are on a good path and we're in it together.
Thanks, Gemma and Sarah. Some brief next steps on where we're going with this project. Now that the report is out in the world, we're going to be doing some continued outreach online and at in-person events through to March 2025 to disseminate these findings. A really great part of this project is the emphasis on sharing at in-person events. We've been finding it very helpful throughout the process of doing this project, even to recruit participants. Sharing what we were doing at in-person gatherings has been incredibly valuable. So we want to continue to prioritize that through March 2025. We find that we're able to have much more nuanced conversations with the stakeholders who have the power to take action on some of these recommendations from the report if we're meeting with them face-to-face at industry gatherings, at government and decision-making spaces where they're already kind of talking about policies that would impact young people. So one ask for our audience is if there are events or gatherings you think we could share these findings at, we'd love to attend a few more before we're closed with the campaigning part of this project. So do let us know. We will also be doing a social media campaign to share some of these key findings, particularly amplifying some of the quotes and stories from young people. And as part of our continued closeout of this research, in doing the literature review and setting up this project, we noted how limited the research was in that focused specifically on youth perspectives, but that there is a lot of momentum on policies related to green jobs, to youth skills, to the future of work in the clean energy industry. So we'll be continuing to track both the research that comes out or surveys that come out around this topic, or the specific policy changes that are announced in the next year and the coming years that build on these core issue areas, and that will inform our future areas of research. Because although the reports are light on the age range of 18 to 30, the momentum on these issues is growing. So we'll continue to track progress on those things. All right, we have a few questions in the chat. So welcome you again to drop your questions in the Q&A field.
Un rappel aussi, si vous avez des questions en français, veuillez les demander dans la boîte des questions.
Great. I'll start with a couple of these questions here. We have a question from Ashna asking, as an industry professional, how can I collaborate with Student Energy to take action towards designing a program for youth upskilling or connecting more young people to the clean energy field? Thank you for this question and for your interest. One of the ways we collaborate with industry professionals is through our career training program. And in this program, we recruit a cohort of young people from around the world, including in Canada. And we also recruit mentors, organizations, or companies in the energy space, and we pair up teams of young people to work with clean energy companies or other organizations to do a practicum project and get a little bit of experience in what it's like to work in a professional capacity in the energy industry while they receive energy systems education, project management training, and other mentorship through Student Energy. So this would be a great way to collaborate is through the career training program. Another way we often collaborate with industry professionals is through youth advisory committees and setting those up. And youth advisory committees are often thought of in a government setting, but we've also worked with energy companies to set up youth committees where they influence and inform the company's climate commitments, their energy policies, their youth recruitment strategies. Often the best way to improve those and make those equitable is to hear from those who will be directly impacted. So that's another way you can reach out to us and we could collaborate. We also have a great share here from Vanessa Colon about the New York Youth Employment Program, which is focused on upskilling people in renewable energy and advanced manufacturing. Sounds like a very cool program. I encourage our audience to check it out for more details. And Vanessa will share in the chat there how you can connect with us, and our contact info will also be on the next slide. A question here from Azizul on what carries more weight in the current scenario, the jobs available in the clean energy industry or the number of youth interested in working in the clean energy sector? That's an interesting question. I'll also open to Gemma and Sarah if you want to weigh in. I'll refer to our earlier research project as well, the Global Youth Energy Outlook. In that one, we surveyed 42,000 young people in 129 countries. And we found that we surveyed a lot of people and almost everyone was interested in working in the clean energy sector, but they didn't know where to start. They hadn't even gotten to the point of applying to jobs and being rejected or, trying to get these jobs because there was a lack of awareness of what these jobs were, where they were, how they find them, and what the diversity of jobs are that exist in the clean energy sector. So there's a huge gap even before the stage that many of the youth we interviewed for this project got to. Many of the youth we interviewed had attempted, had tried, had some awareness of what jobs exist in the clean energy sector. But on a globally speaking, many youth who are interested aren't even aware of the jobs that are available in the clean energy industry. So I'm not sure which carries weight necessarily, but there is a definite gap between the huge numbers of young people who are interested in the sector and the availability of jobs, even knowing what those jobs are in the clean energy industry. But Gemma and Sarah, feel free to add anything if you'd like.
I think it's quite interesting too, because there are a lot of jobs that are open and a lot of youth that want those positions. And again, there's that gap of skills, and that's really where the research stemmed from. And just trying to figure out what we could do to support youth to get into those entry-level positions. And so there is quite a teeter-totter going on there.
Absolutely. And yeah, building off of that as well, I would say that the question could also be phrased as who is getting those jobs and who isn't getting those jobs. And I think through some of the research that we were able to conduct, we saw that especially for Indigenous and racialized youth, as well as for newcomers to Canada, so either international students or people who had just moved to the country, there were more barriers to getting jobs in clean energy. And so we need to also take this into consideration when thinking about some of those jobs that are available. Who are they most available to, and how do we make that a little bit more equitable? Yeah, great question though.
Great, thank you. A question from Ryan. Really interested in knowing whether this research work will be carried continuously along with policy and law changes, as well as outside of Canada, such as in the United States. Yes, we definitely hope to continue to kind of track how our findings and our recommendations align with the policy changes that are already underway here in Canada and in the United States, and how those might change. Considering big election years in both countries. So we will be tracking those policy changes closely, movements for a youth climate core, the Sustainable Jobs Act, many other policies that are underway that will definitely impact youth careers in this space. This particular project has come to a close, but we're now open for taking on our next project. We're also interested in supporting young people who may want to take on similar research at their own educational institutions or organizations. And we're happy to share data or information from our previous projects to kind of jumpstart any future projects that come out. Thank you for that question. We have a question from Mike here on, will this be presented to government bodies to help develop further program, procurement, or other funding supports? What is the ideal outcome from this report for the next and longer term objectives? Thank you for that question, Mike. I'll also open this to Gemma and Sarah in a second. This definitely will be presented to government bodies, and that's something we've considered from the beginning of this report, is specifically what are the departments within the Canadian government that most need to hear the findings from this report, and how can we integrate that outreach process as we come to the conclusion. And we do that in a few different ways. I think one, the Net Zero Advisory Body that is one of the supporters of this project will also receive these findings, and will kind of ask for their support in outreach as well across the government departments that they work with. We also regularly work with a couple of the programs that are currently implementing some kind of youth skills or green jobs training for young people. For example, the Science, Technology, and Internship program with NRCan, Natural Resources Canada, is a program that has supported other initiatives related to student energy and 7-gen energy. And there we hope to kind of amplify young people's perspectives through focus groups that we've held, through direct recommendations we've made on how those programs can better include young people, and specifically Indigenous youth as well. So there's a few government departments that we're kind of targeting with our findings as being in the best position to implement some of the calls to action that young people have made. So we hope to do more. If you have recommendations on who we can reach out to, present to, we'd love to, but that's definitely something that is important to us.
I also just wanted to encourage participants to access the toolkit. You could download it, you could share it with people in your regions, people in your local governments, and don't be shy to reach out to government officials or industry actors, and with toolkits and resources like this, and send an email sometimes if this is a company you want to work with, and you want to ensure that these things are happening. Send them the material. Just kind of put yourself out there also, and find there's many different resources that are similar to this research. It's starting to become a thing in the sector, and so there are different organizations you can tap into too. Yeah, just don't be shy. Get the word out there for us.
Great. We have a couple questions here on other regions, incorporating other regions into the practical work experience. And yes, definitely student energy works globally. So all of our programs are open to young people from all countries. So if you're interested in engaging with us directly, definitely feel free to apply to the fellowship, the career training program, or connect with us to see if there's a chapter in your region that you could join. As for the research, our past 2 research projects on this topic were global in nature, and those were more survey-based, online survey-based research projects. The Global Youth Energy Outlook and the Energy Transition Skills Project that were published last year and the year before, those were looking at a global perspective and a global data set. one reason we dove into a country-specific focus on this report is to have this more, a little bit more of an unstructured, nuanced interview-based process where we could dive into the specific challenges and kind of opportunities that exist in one country's energy system, just because we know the energy system in every country is so different. But if you are interested in the global perspective, I definitely recommend checking out those two previous reports. The first one surveyed 42,000 young people on all climate and energy issues broadly. That's our Global Youth Energy Outlook. And then the second one, the Energy Transition Skills Project, very similar name, I know, surveyed about 2,500 young people specifically on the topic of skills in a global data set. Any other questions that we want to answer? Great. And for all attendees, any programs that we've mentioned, we'll share out in a follow-up email. So we'll have our contact info here. You can reach out to us through these emails, but we'll also share out any programs that we've mentioned, like career training, the fellowship, etc., in the follow-up email after this webinar. One final question here from Aiden. When young people are promoting themselves as clean energy engagers in interviewer applications, is there a sense that they're approaching employers solely on the altruistic benefits of clean energy? If we're dealing with hiring at private firms, is there a potential for young people to think and speak more strategically about the role of clean energy? And is there a feeling that admitting are young people empowered to speak this truth when seeking opportunity? Big questions. I don't know if we got to those exact answers during the interviews. I would say, based on my sense from reading the transcripts of the clean energy industry that we work for, is there's a lot of directness about what the jobs are, what the skills are needed. And I would say there's, from the youth we spoke to, there's not really a sense that youth are being or presenting themselves strategically or their interests strategically. There's the piece about young people being passionate about working in the clean energy space, and then the skills that they'll need to implement some of these very tangible projects, like is it solar installation? Is it an energy efficiency or retrofitting job? What does that actually need? What experience does that need and how can they get it? So there's kind of a directness with which young people are approaching these job applications. So I don't know if that answers your question, but both from our youth interviews and the industry actor interviews, it kind of seemed like there was a shared understanding of like there are some hard skills that are needed for these jobs, and then there are some soft skills that would help anyone thrive in a professional workplace, regardless of if it's clean energy or another type of work. But Gemma and Sarah, if there's anything you want to add there, please do.
I think overall, like that drive and the passion that youth so often feel and share was also respected and encouraged by industry actors that we interviewed. So if you are a youth and you are extremely passionate about a topic in clean energy, don't feel the need to kind of limit that. It's almost you should use that to show just how committed you are to the field. So I think that's like one of the pieces that I would answer that question with.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us, for all of your questions. I apologize if we didn't get to everyone's questions, but please feel free to email us and we're more than happy to. And we'll also email you at the end of this webinar with the report itself, more information about student energy, some of the topics mentioned here in the Q&A about our specific programs, future studies, that kind of thing. So yes, please stay in touch. We want to thank again everyone who contributed to this report. And we hope that this is not just kind of a report, but turns into an active campaign, and that we will continue with student energy to disseminate the findings, to make it a two-way learning between all the stakeholders we speak to, including more young people, to see, do these findings resonate? Are these calls to action relevant? and we'll continue updating them as time goes on. So thank you so much for joining. I'll turn it over to each of our speakers for a final word, maybe starting with Gemma, then Sarah, then Kimia to close us off.
Excellent. Yeah. I think what I'd like to close on is both, again, a huge thank you to everyone that we interviewed for this project to happen. And also the encouragement to go to the report and see what you can pull from it. There is so much information there that is relevant to any sort of person approaching this research. So whether you are a youth, whether you are an industry employer, whether you're someone who doesn't employ in an industry but can, chat with your bosses, whether you are a government official or have some sort of sway in that field, there are pieces to pull from this report. Because as youth continue to reiterate, we need to see more coordination in this field in order to work towards that clean energy future that includes youth. So go to the report, see what you can pull from it, and see how to use it in your everyday work to make a clean energy industry that works better for youth. Pass it over to Sarah.
Yeah, so I just really want to take a moment to encourage youth and industry actors. If you see an issue and you want to bring attention to it, there's so many ways to do that. And I think interviewing is really fun. We're in an age where youth love social media. There's video content all over, and it's a really good way to bring these issues to light and find solutions. I just wanted to add also, there was a youth that participated as an interviewee and went around and started their own research, and then reached out to us, and it was very empowering. And they were a settler, immigrant settler, and they were really interested in the Indigenous perspective and the Indigenous impacts. And to see somebody come and turn around and do that was really, really powerful. And I just want to say, like, those passions and those anxieties that are in you, don't be scared to take that first step to work towards solutions for that, and bring attention to these issues. That's what we need. And just like being courageous enough to share your perspectives and your stories in these spaces is really important. And just to remember that your voice matters.
Je veux faire un grand remerciement aux équipes de Student Energy. C'est vraiment un grand travail et j'ai appris beaucoup pendant cette séance. Et comme Shakti et l'équipe, elles ont communiqué, après cette séance, toutes les informations et les ressources vont être partagées à travers des courriels. Le rapport va être aussi disponible en 3 semaines en français. Alors, ça va être envoyé aussi à tous les participants qui sont ici, qui ont enregistré pour ce panel. Alors, restez en contact et les informations vont être partagées avec vous. Merci beaucoup pour votre participation et pour votre engagement avec ce sujet.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you soon.